Welcome to the Authority File, the academic library podcast from Choice. Choice is a publishing division of the ACRL and the publisher of Choice Reviews and CC Advisor. This episode is brought to you by the University of Chicago Press. I'm Bill Mickey, the host of the podcast and the editorial director at Choice, and for this 4-episode series, my guests and I are discussing the inner workings of two storied institutions in the academic publishing and library worlds: the Chicago Manual of Style and the publishing office at the Library of Congress. So for the next episode, I'll be joined by Carol Saller, a longtime manuscript editor at the University of Chicago Press, who now inhabits more of a marketing role at the Manual as editor of its online Q&A and the Chicago Manual of Style Shop Talk blog. Also joining me is Becky Brasington Clark, who heads up the Library of Congress Publishing Office as its Director of Publishing. In this final episode of our 4-part series, which we recorded over Skype, we talk about how the Publishing Office amplifies the Library of Congress's outreach efforts and why all of the style guides are sick to death of arguing over the Oxford comma. I know one of the things that both of your organizations are really good at is marketing, and we've talked a little bit about this already, but especially of e-resources, which incidentally is something Choice just published a white paper on. So feel free to check out choice360.org, to a little plug here, look at our white paper section. But I'm curious, Becky, how does the publishing office amplify the library's outreach initiatives? And given the broad appeal of the library's collection and the size of your community that you serve, how do you sort of help prioritize those opportunities? And lastly, is there anything in that bag of tricks that you think maybe a librarian trying to drive use at their own organization or institution could duplicate?
Well, it's all a big challenge. I mean, I think one of the challenges of working at the world's largest library and publishing to promote the collections of the world's largest library is that you're constantly drinking from a fire hose. The ideas and the wow moments, I mean, they literally happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's a wonder, and it's one of the marvelous things about working here. You've got people who will come in and say, oh gosh, we just acquired this, or we're getting ready to acquire that, and it's the world's tiniest or the world's biggest or the world's oldest, and everything has a story to tell. And I think the challenge is figuring out whether and how telling that story is going to resonate with people out there across the country. And you can't, not every book, not every story is going to resonate with every potential reader. But it's something that we think about just as any publisher would think about it. What is it we're trying to do here? What purpose are we trying to serve? And what larger story can be told? What can we do to contextualize a topic? And I'll go back to the baseball exhibit and the baseball books as an example. We didn't curate those, the exhibition or the book to jam down your throat. Here are the great collection items at the Library of Congress. Our job is really to tell the story of the history of baseball and illustrate it with collection items. So that's the we're really focusing on storytelling as much as we can, because that's what's going to engage a reader or engage a visitor. It's not, look at this old document. People don't respond to that. They need the context. They need to know why it's important.
That's great to hear, because it's you're taking sort of this holistic approach. I mean, especially putting a lot of weight into what your audience or your community wants to hear about, but also, as you say, putting everything into a sort of contextual aspect and providing that the storytelling behind it. I like that.
There's also a whole line of products that we do that are non-book items, and it's another thing I'd love to speak about for a minute. Mm-hmm. We also work with co-publishers to create calendars, note cards, quiz decks, jigsaw puzzles, coloring books, sticker books. And those also highlight collection items. And I think these are really important to the library's outreach efforts because they will help us make the collections visible and accessible to pre-readers and in some cases to non-readers. We've done a Wizard of Oz coloring wall calendar for years with Pomegranate Communications. And it actually even comes with a small set of crayons. So it features these illustrations of W. Denslow, who illustrated Frank Baum's wonderful Wizard of Oz. And we've got that first edition of that book, which was published in 1900 in our rare book collection. So the calendar basically reproduces those illustrations in outline only, and then it's up to the person who owns the calendar, be it a child or an adult, to color in those illustrations to suit their purposes. And in that way, regardless of whether they think about the Library of Congress or they think about W. Denslow or even know who he was, they are spending time with this cultural artifact that still resonates in some important way. And how cool is that?
Exactly, yeah. Support for this podcast comes from the University of Chicago Press and the 17th edition of the Chicago Manual of Style, All the Rules for Writing, referenced by generations of writers, editors, professionals, and college students, available at bookstores everywhere. The Chicago Manual of Style is also online. Annual subscriptions are available to individuals and small user groups, as well as to academic, private, and public libraries. Free trial subscriptions are available. Learn more about the ways you can bring the Chicago Manual of Style to your library by visiting www.chicagomanualofstyle.org. That's www.chicagomanualofstyle.org. Listeners can save 25% on a print copy of the manual by using promo code CHOICEPOD25. That's CHOICEPOD, the number 25, at checkout. You mentioned the sort of rare books, and I don't think we touched on this, but I think one of the other sort of, priorities of that's sort of woven into what you do is providing visibility to materials that are too fragile to even exhibit or put in front of an audience, and you're able to capture or digitize some of these in some cases, and still be able to present those to the library's community in a way that you physically can't because they're too rare or too fragile and that kind of thing.
Yes, that's exactly right. And Herbert Putnam, one of the earlier librarians of Congress, said that one of the reasons for having a publishing program at the Library of Congress was to create facsimiles, so as to reduce the wear and tear on the originals. We have two manuscripts in the library of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. They're quite valuable. They're quite rare. And because we are a library, conservation and preservation are paramount. So in digitizing these amazing documents, we can make them available online. We can reproduce them in books. And as we do so, we can contextualize them, talk about them, enlarge certain aspects of the scan to point out various aspects. And in that way, you're not only making the material accessible to users, but you're actually you're contextualizing it and making it understandable to them.
Right. Okay. So in the last few minutes that we have left here, Carol, I know there's sort of this weird tribalism around style, like APA, the AP, Chicago, and so on. If there's a guide out there, there's a group of true believers who've latched on to some rule of that style and just can't let it go. And I'm sure some of this is spun off some funny memes, so to speak. And I'm wondering if there's a particularly funny piece or example that jumps to mind, or even something memorable to you.
Well, honestly, I hate to encourage this, but there's one post that's been flying around Facebook and Twitter literally for years. It's from The Onion, and the headline is something like, 4 copy editors killed in Chicago Manual AP-style gang violence. And it's pretty darn funny. But the truth is we're on very friendly terms with folks at AP. We're always happy to share a panel or an event with them, and we don't consider them rivals. And I'm pretty sure that every one of us on both sides is honestly sick to death of people fussing about the Oxford comma. So, but that's the most memorable one I can think of.
Hey, Carol, have you seen the work of this artist named Grant Snyder, who did a riff on the proofreader's marks a few years ago?
Yes, that goes around too, and it is funny. It's very funny.
It's so affectionate, and it's so very funny.
By now, people have imitated him. So if the listeners Google something like proofreading marks, they'll find variations. But his is really funny and original.
Can you quickly describe that for our listeners who might not know?
Well, so he sets it up just like Figure 2.6, which for those of us who've been in the publishing industry for a long time, a lot of us have kept photocopies taped to the wall for easy reference for years, and you might mark it up a little bit. So you immediately, the delete mark is the first item in the left-hand column, and so he does that. And then his next one is the icon or the proofreader's mark for setting type in italics. So it's ITAL in a circle, just as it is in the Chicago Manual of Style. The next instruction is set in Italy. And so he's drawn a little outline of the country of Italy and put ITAL in it. And then the next one is what we all know as the instructions to set the type in Roman type, and it's ROM in a circle. And he explains that as preferably in Rome. It's adorable.
That's hilarious. And then, Becky, over to you. I mean, anything at the Library of Congress or the publishing office that jumps to mind that, quote unquote, broke the internet?
Yeah, when you first mentioned breaking the internet, you said something about, the way Beyonce's picture does. And
right.
Oh, gosh, we can't compete with Beyonce.
Right, or just about any Beyonce picture would be the case, yeah.
But then I remembered the opening keynote at the most recent ALA annual meeting in New Orleans. So the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, was slated to interview former First Lady Michelle Obama. And I'm sure many, many of your listeners have been to ALA, and I've been to about a bajillion of them. And so, we all know about the crowds and the queues for the keynotes, but I have honestly never seen anything like this. In the convention center in New Orleans, I mean, people were lining up hours before the event, and the line stretched like half the length of the convention center and then doubled back again. I left a session that I couldn't leave early, and I had only 45 minutes before the event started, and I saw those lines, and I thought, I will never get in. But I'm going to stand in line anyway because it's Carla Hayden and Michelle Obama. So I waited in line, and wouldn't you know, I got in, and I even got a good seat. And so it started out with street jazz from high school musicians who work with the musician Trombone Shorty. And so by the time Dr. Hayden and the former First Lady took the stage, the place was jumping. It was like library celebrity Jeopardy or something. It was crazy. And the music was amazing. The interview was amazing. And by the time the program was over, about 5,000 librarians were just feeling really inspired and engaged. It was wonderful.
Fantastic. That was Carol Saller and Becky Brasington Clark. This concludes the final episode of our 4-part series on the Chicago Manual of Style and Library of Congress Publishing Office. This series was brought to you by the University of Chicago Press. Find all of the episodes of The Authority File on your favorite podcast app or on our website, choice360.org. Just click on the Librarianship dropdown. On choice360.org, you'll also find information on Choice's entire product platform, including Choice Reviews, CC Advisor, Choice Webinars, resources for college libraries, our white papers, and a whole lot more. A great way to keep up with the Authority File is to join the Choice Authority File Facebook group, which you can access via the Choice Reviews Facebook page. As a member of the group, you can give us feedback, suggest podcast participants, chat with other listeners, and submit new topic ideas. Sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and production duties are courtesy of Choice's digital media specialist, Mark Turks. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.